And you have to change that mindset. Art isn't like that. It's it's a project. It's ultimately you want to create amazing images, and that's what we're going for. It's like it's not about how many frames I shoot or this and that. It matters what you get to walk away with in the end. And I think that's the thing to learn really as you go through business. And again, depending on what you do, it could be totally different. If you are a school photographer or something and you're shooting 100 people a day, then you may have to put a time limit because you just don't have the ability to do that. It's just a different kind of work. It really depends on the kind of work you're doing. But I find for more of a headshot type, it's good to build a relationship.
Absolutely. And, of course, we've been talking about individual headshots. Volume situations are completely different. That's a completely different thing. If you're shooting a company that has 45 employees, or you're shooting a conference or something, and you've got 100 or 200 people to go through on a day, that's a completely different thing. That's a conveyor belt thing. But of course, it's really, time and quality are virtually equivalent. It's literally the more time, it's like a balancing scale. The more time you spend, the better the quality is going to be, and the less time you spend, the less quality you're going to produce. But the reality, of course, always is like, how good is good enough? That's the thing. If you're shooting, and again, it's all about expectation management. Like if you've got a client, they say like, we've got a conference, and all of our sales team from around the globe are here, and there's like 400 people. Can you shoot them all in 2 days? Yes, I can. 100% I can. No problem, I can. But the expectation isn't like, oh, you're gonna create the photographic equivalent of Rembrandt here. You're not.
Right.
The expectation is you're shooting 400 people in 2 days. That's the expectation here, and I can deliver that. And they're all going to be decently lit, and they're all going to look good, and they're all going to look the same, which is the importance with those kind of jobs, of course, because they want to use them for their corporate websites and whatever. They're all going to be lit the same, and they're all going to, the background's going to be the same, and they're all going to be rendered the same. So their website's going to look good. That's their expectation. And the expectation is not like, oh, I could only shoot 200. We're going to come back or make extra appointments for the other 200, because that's not what they want. They want to shoot all of them in that whatever time's available. And that's different. But if you have an individual come to you and they want a headshot for their for their website, for example, and it's an individual headshot, the expectation is different.
You might think of yourself as this like really amazing portrait photographer, maybe you are, but when you have to shoot 400 portraits in 2 days, you're not that portrait photographer anymore. You're basically
very humbling experience.
A machine. Yeah. You're there. You try to make people. You say the same corny joke to every person to get them to smile, and you basically just bag it out and you're done. I mean, there's not much else you can do there, and you can't really stress about it because that's the job and that's what they're looking for. Because expectations to yourself and also to the client are super important. I mean, that's really what matters, because in the end, that's what they're paying for is a certain job. It's not always going to be the best thing in the world you can put in your portfolio. The goal, I think, for somebody like me is to have clients that want you to produce something that's good enough to put in your portfolio every time they come to see you. And those clients are willing to take the time and spend the money to do that.
Yeah. And that's ultimately, that's the thing where, both parties are happy, where you're happy with the work that you're creating as a photographer. And of course, the client is happy with the work that you've created. And once you've sort of built up a reputation for, or let's put it this way, once your work has built up a reputation for what you can do, then that becomes easier. But that's also, that's something when we're talking about growing as a photographer, that's really something that I've found in my own past that's been a really important kind of factor in my own growth as a photographer, is to understand how to read the client's expectation. That's been so important. I think everybody's had these experiences where you've completely missed somebody's expectation. And maybe I remember, years ago. This was years ago. I started shooting boxing matches, and I did it for fun. It was paid as a paid job, But I also thought it was kind of fun shooting some sports, not something that I really knew a lot about at the time. And so, I started working with this organization. This amateur boxing things. It's a charity event. It's a ton of fights. It's about anywhere between 20 and 30 fights per night, right? it's a lot of shots. So you come away with a lot of shots and a lot of boxing, basically. You photograph a lot of people kicking their heads in, basically.
Right. Are just now, as a curiosity, not to interrupt you, but are these things fast? Like, how long does these box? Like, I only think of like these professional boxing matches that like are hours long, but like I mean professional like on pay-per-view, but like are like most of these boxing matches long, or are they like 5-minute affairs? I mean, what's the?
So they're 3 rounds. So 3 rounds. Okay. They used to be 3 rounds of 2 minutes each. They've just shortened it to 1.5 minutes. So you get all in. You probably get about 5 fights per hour, 5-6 fights per hour, and that's mainly because so it's so you get the extra fight, and then of course there's some time in between each round, and then they get a little plaque at the end of it, and of course then there's this whole spiel of the referee announcing the winner and all that kind of stuff. There's just all that sort of stuff going on. So really, realistically, it's about 5-6 fights per hour. So the whole evening is quite long. It's like 5-6 hours. That's the usual length for it. But it's a charitable event. They raise money for charity for cancer research, basically. But it's an interesting thing. For me, it was interesting because I didn't know how to shoot sports really in the beginning, and it was a cool thing to do. I'm not into boxing at all, actually, but it was just it's just a thing. And I get really close access. I can literally be on the ring, like literally hanging over the ropes. And that's how close I am. So I can get some cool shots that way. But in the beginning, when I first started doing that, of course, I went at it with like, I'm going to edit like every single image. And bearing in mind that on a typical night, I probably deliver around about, I'd say between 600 and 900 images is what I deliver. Because, of course, those images are being used, they go into an online gallery, and then the participants and their family, whatever, they can go and, and pick out some images to have them printed and that sort of thing. So that's the purpose. So I went into it with like thinking, I'm going to super edit every single image because they're going to look amazing and blah, 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 right? Just like I would do with like a portrait. Right. And the problem is, you do that with like 600 images, you're going to be spending a lot of time editing images. So, and then eventually you get to the point where you go like, well, okay, what am I doing here? What is the end use of these images? And how good is good enough? And then once you get to that point, you go like, okay, so what's my workflow, and how can I reduce the amount of time that I'm editing? Because the reality is, whilst I'm shooting, I'm earning money. Whilst I'm editing, I'm losing money. It's as simple as that. So, and when you're editing that amount of images, you're going to have to really get to the point where you can deal with each individual image super, super quick. Because even if you just spend 1 minute per image, that's still 600 images. We're delivering 600 photos, and that's 10 hours.
That's 10 hours, yeah.
That's 10 hours of editing. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip, then press here for the full episode in glorious Technicolor. Hey, and don't forget to subscribe.